So these are the two areas we're really going to focus on today. We want to make sure that we protect our customer base, that we keep it growing, and that in turn that we protect our cash flow, because that is what really is going to help us grow our business. So today we're going to talk about data breach and really crisis management as a whole. So we're going to start with something a little fun, a little exercise. Let me get to the fun stuff here. So I need your help. So I'm going to put a couple of brands up here, and I want you to tell me what you think about some keywords that pop into your head when you see this brand. Always open. What else? Convenient. Ah, I was waiting for somebody to say Slurpee. Yes, my favorite part of 7-Eleven, right? Great. What about this brand? I heard expensive. One on every corner, right? There's a ton of them. Okay. What about this brand? Yeah. You know what's interesting about this brand? So last year, if I'd asked you this same question, what would you have said? Probably would have had a lot of good things to say about this brand, right? I know my wife would. Can tell you right now, we spent a lot of money at Target. It's pretty scary, isn't it? That this brand who had such a great reputation, they spent millions of dollars on their brand. And let me tell you something. I think that a lot of people that own a small business, especially if it has your name on it, they don't consider the fact that it is a brand. I don't care where you are. If you're in any town, America, you have a brand. It may have a smaller radius than Target, but you do have a brand. And that brand is something that you should protect with everything you can, because you built that brand, right? You've spent a lot of hard hours, maybe over the course of decades, to build that brand. And so you should recognize that. I have a lot of people that will not admit that, but you do have a brand. Well, guess what? Target's not alone. You probably recognize these brands. Neiman Marcus, Michaels, a conglomerate that owns several different hotel chains. This is not just a Target situation. This is happening on a monthly, daily, weekly. We hear about it every day. So let's talk a little bit about data breach and hackers, because I know that in your world, this is kind of a foreign topic. We talk about it every day, but it's foreign. People don't understand where this is coming from. How did this happen to Target? How does this happen to businesses in America? Well, first of all, hackers are not teenagers in their mother's basement trying to get into your network, right? They are very sophisticated conglomerates that not only go after companies like Target, they're really indiscriminate. They don't care who it is. I have people all the time say, well, Chad, nobody wants my information. I'm in a little town in Arkansas. I'm in a little town in Mississippi. Guess what? They don't care. They don't know if you're McDonald's, Target, or Smithville Pharmacy. They don't know that. They are scanning through. They've got a huge number of people that all they do is go through IP addresses, thousands of IP addresses, and they find open holes in your network, right? Those open holes, it doesn't matter if it's McDonald's. Doesn't matter if it's Smithville Pharmacy. They're finding these open holes, and they're penetrating your network to get the information. And so one of the things I want to make sure that I'm clear about today is I'm not going to talk about data breach in terms of Target. I'm going to talk about data breach in terms of you. So these are relevant numbers for you. $80,000. That's the cost of a data breach to you. That's not Target. The average cost of a data breach is $80,000 per location. If you have more than one, then that's per location. And it's made up of a forensic audit that has to be performed if you get breached, And trust me, Target's going through a forensic audit right now, right? Because they have to determine the scope of the breach. How big is it? And then, how many of you got a call when they said they were going to replace your credit card from the Target breach? Right? What a great service by your bank. That was so nice of your bank to do that. Guess who's going to pay for that card? Target. Guess who's going to pay for the cards of your customers if you get breached? You are. And it's about $20 to $50 per card. So think about how many credit card transactions you do a day, a week, a month. And here's the scary part. It takes on average 210 days to discover a breach. And I would be willing to bet that there are plenty of people in here that are breached right now, because you just don't know. I mean, you don't have a way of knowing as a small business owner, typically, that you've been breached. So the day that you get the phone call from one of your customers that says, I think my card got breached in your location, too late. It's already been 210 days, at least. So it's over. You know, it's like if you see one cockroach, there's 1,000, right? You can't rewind. These crime groups, they never get caught. I mean, very rarely, because they're in third world countries, they're in the Ukraine, they're way far away, and they're very sophisticated, multi-layered organizations. So these guys, once they get into your network, they aren't the ones that are selling the credit card information. It's several organizations down the chain. And you can Google today, buying volume credit card information on the internet. So it's something we're not going to be able to go out and put these people in jail like I know that you would want to do. You've got to protect yourselves. And the fines and the fees that are associated with that $80K, I don't know about you, but as a small business owner, $80,000 would be such a huge hit to your business. And then not only that, but what you put off doing to get compliant, you have to do to take credit cards again. And you have to do it while you're paying this $80,000. And you can't take credit cards during that period of time. So what would happen to you if you could not take credit cards, say, for 3 months? 3 months of no credit cards. Be pretty tough. So that's the situation that we're in today. And hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of what you're facing in the market. So there's a lot of PR that's happening with Target today, right? You're hearing on the news. And you know, I'll be honest with you, we're still learning information about the Target breach. So what we know now is that it was a malicious software that was embedded in their system, and it's kind of like software that gets embedded in your personal computer that propagates and it grabs information. It's not the kind of PR you want, right? And here's the interesting part. The government has jumped on board to save the consumer. Senator Menendez of New Jersey popped out in front of a Target and did a press conference and said, we need to protect the consumer over profitability. So I don't know about you, I don't care what your political affiliation is, but I think you have to agree with me that the political climate right now is not in the favor of the small business owner, or really business in general, right? We don't need any help to really prop up our business. What we need help with is our government to help us keep our doors open and create laws and regulations that aren't going to hurt us, but help us. So let's make sure that we focus on you as a pharmacy owner. And let's talk about the things that you need to do in your business to stay safe. So I'm going to give you a little history of PCI because I know that it's such an interesting topic for you. But you need to understand where this came from. Because I have a lot of people that say, hey, I've owned a business, and it didn't necessarily have to be just a pharmacy. I've owned a business for 20, 30 years, and nobody's ever asked me to do the things you're asking me to do, Chad. Okay? And I tell them this. Over the last 20 years, even the last 10 years, what changes have you seen in your pharmacy? I mean, there's so many cool things that allow you to run your business more efficiently. You can run your business now and not even be there, right? There's so many great tools, but every piece of technology that you put in your pharmacy creates another hole for a hacker, okay? So what's happened with all of this technology and the banks having to foot the bill for so many years for data breach, PCI I can sum up really in one statement. The PCI Security Council was created by all of the major credit card brands, and the PCI DSS, Data Security Standard, was created with one purpose in mind. Can anybody guess what that purpose was? Absolutely. It was to push the liability down to you for the data breach. They didn't want to foot the bill anymore. They wanted to make sure you paid so they didn't have to. And it applies to everyone in this room that swipes a credit card in their business. So every nail salon, you've seen the squares on the iPhones. My wife gets her hair done by a lady in our neighborhood that uses Square. And what most people don't know is you have to be PCI compliant to use Square. When you sign your merchant agreement, you are signing a contract saying that you will be PCI compliant. And most people have no idea what that means, right? So there are over 300 requirements. And let me tell you, they're IT techie geek requirements, okay? They're not something you want to deal with every day, right? As a small business owner, it's not what you signed up for. So they're very IT focused, and it's a tough process. I mean, it takes time and energy. It's an arduous process. And there's a lot of people that really propagate myths. They don't understand it. Even technology vendors don't understand it. You would be surprised in a company like Target. I talk to huge brands every day, and I'm just amazed at how these IT guys with so much experience, these IT studs, you can ask them 3 questions and bring them to their knees about PCI, okay? And I look incredibly smart, right? So it's something that, don't feel bad. You're probably on the same playing field as some of the brands that you know, some of the places you eat, some of the places you shop. I call my wife all the time and say, do not use your credit card at this place. And I'm serious. That's not over dramatic. Some of these places have no firewall in place. They have nothing protecting your credit card. Most places that you ate over the course of this trip, think about it. Do you really think that they've done everything they can do for security? Because guess what? Nobody wants to pay for it, right? So you have to think in terms of being a consumer. Remember, we got to protect our loyal customer base, right? So now you know everything you need to know about PCI, right? This is a huge myth that people have about PCI. And I'm not going to pick on the point-of-sale vendors, right? They're our friends. And we need them, right? We need them to be able to transact our business and to get more and more information from our business to be more efficient. But what happens is point-of-sale systems have their own set of PCI requirements. It's totally separate, not totally separate, but it doesn't cover everything that you need to do as a business to be PCI compliant. So when you do your shopping on your point-of-sale system or any business application that you're using, one of the great marketing terms they use is they are PCI compliant. And they're not lying to you. They went through a lot of trouble to get PCI compliant. But guess what? Just because they're PCI compliant doesn't mean you are PCI compliant. So don't fall into that trap. We've had people get breached that say, you know what, I thought because my POS system was compliant, I was compliant. Well, that is one piece of your compliance area, just one piece. Your cardholder environment is a lot more than just your point-of-sale system. So you can get breached outside of your point-of-sale system. The nice thing about companies like ANX is we have to be vendor agnostic, right? We have to be able to work with every business system that's in this exhibit hall. There's not one that we need to favor. There's not one that doesn't work with what we do. And when I say we, I'm talking about PCI providers as a whole, okay? You have to be agnostic. You have to be able to work with any software vendor, any point of sale system. So that's important to understand. When you put PCI in place in your business, this is not a system that needs to be compatible with something else. It's an overarching compliance process, right? Just what you needed. One other process on your plate, right? So here's where I get the IT guys on their knees. And this is actually kind of fun. You go into these big companies and these IT guys, let me talk about my firewalls because these are like my children. I love my firewalls. I pick them out myself. I feed and water my firewalls every day. So you're not going to come in here and tell me that we aren't safe, because that's my job, is I am the IT stud, right? I mean, yes, you are the stud, right? But let me ask you this. Do you take credit cards in all your locations? How many people take credit cards in all your locations? Right. Have you trained every cashier, every person that swipes a credit card in your store upon hire and annually with a PCI certified security awareness training? And that's a great first question, because I don't care what company it is, they're going to look at you like you're absolutely crazy. If you think you have 15 people in your organization and you're like, there's no way, think about if you are someplace like McDonald's or Taco Bell and you have 50 to 100 people in one location, and that's out of 500 locations. And they say, there's no way we can do it. You can. Oh, sorry, too far. Second question. Have all the employees, and I mean all the employees within your organization, read and acknowledged upon hire and on a yearly basis your security policies? And are they updated yearly? And do they include all the PCI requirements? No way. Do you even know what's involved in that? I mean, most people don't even understand PCI. How do I get them all in my security policy, right? Number 3, how many of you actually remote into your pharmacy from home or, okay, great. It's becoming more and more prevalent, right? It's a great way to run your business. When you remote in, do you use a service like Log Me In or Go to My PC? And if you do, can you log in with simply a password? If you can, then you're not PCI compliant. It has to be a 2-factor authentication. And just before I get IT geek, all that is real simple. When you can't just put a password in. It's something you have, something you know, the password, and something you have, like your phone, or some of you may have worked for companies that gave you the little dongle that puts a unique code in. But it can't just be a password. So let me tell you something. 98% of companies I talk to, I don't care how big they are or how small they are, they answer one of those wrong. And it's kind of like being a little pregnant. I don't care what firewall you have. I don't care if you are the United Nations, which was one of our customers. You're not compliant. So all that work you've done, you are not compliant. If Visa audits you tomorrow, you are not compliant. And that's a hard pill for an IT guy to swallow, let alone a small business owner, right? Because he's been working his tail end off to put his firewalls in. But here's the thing. It's impossible for you to know everything. It's impossible. You can't know everything, but you need to trust people that do, right? You trust your accountant, right? I mean, I certainly am not an accountant, so as a small business owner, I trusted my accountant. I trusted my financial advisors. Same thing with PCI. So why are you at risk? I mean, the answer to this, you could tell me. I could probably give you this slide, and you could create this slide. You don't have the right firewalls. You have consumer-grade firewalls. You may not even have a firewall, right? Here's the bottom line. I'm not going to read this slide. You just do not have the time or energy or the expertise to keep up with this stuff. You just don't. And these hackers know that, and that's why they exploit small businesses. It's bottom line. So what happens if you get breached, right? Here comes the fear factor, right? But it's true. I mean, it's not. This is not a lie. We talk to the Secret Service every day. We talk to small business owners. You hear about the targets. You hear about these big companies. But we hear about the small companies, and it's devastating every day. As a small business owner, there's nothing that pains me worse than hearing someone that is worried about losing their business. Okay? And I'll be real honest with you. I had to close my business, not for this. But I know what it feels like to close your doors and to have invested everything that you have into your business and have to close your doors. Never felt a feeling like that. So I hate hearing about companies, small businesses that are on the verge of closing their doors, because I understand it. The first thing you have to do is you have to stop taking credit cards. The Secret Service does come in, and it's not a lie, they do come in, and they notify you that you've been breached. Now, some of you have probably gotten a phone call that said, hey, from your bank, we think your card has been breached. So we are going to, as a courtesy, reissue your card. How many of you have gotten that phone call? We think your card may have been breached. Hasn't been breached yet, we think. There's a second call. Your card has been breached. We have already canceled your card, and we are sending you a new one. Who's gotten that call? So there's a difference between those two calls, and it's an important difference. The first call, the first thing you're going to ask is where? Where was I breached? Because I'm going to go get that, that business owner. They won't tell you. If they suspect a breach, they won't tell you where the breach may have occurred. The second kind of call, they will tell you, because if you've confirmed the breach, they will tell you what merchant. They will say it was the Bojangles Chicken on Main Street. And guess what? You're going to be pretty pissed at that Bojangles Chicken, aren't you? Right? So that's what happens. And then you have to stop taking credit cards until you can prove that you're 100% PCI compliant. There's a forensic audit that costs $20,000. It's not an option. You have to do it. They're going to do a complete audit. They're going to find out how big the breach is. And they're going to determine whether you were compliant or not. And that's going to determine your fines and fees from the PCI Council. You're going to have legal fees. You're going to have card replacement fees. All of this fun stuff. And then, like I said, you're going to have to remediate. You're going to have to hire a company like ANX or another forensic audit company, and they're going to have to help you get compliant. This is not the time you want to get compliant, by the way, right? It's much harder to do it under duress. So now that we've talked about PCI, I want to talk about crisis management in general. Because I'll tell you, with my personal experience, I can tell you right now, I don't care how many years you've been open, you need a crisis management plan. How many of you have a crisis management plan in place today? I'm seeing very few hands. I'm seeing maybe one or two. How many of you have experienced some sort of crisis, whether it's the cash register broke or an employee walked out, a key employee, at something in your, oh, come on. Everybody needs to raise their hand. You've had some sort of crisis. Every little thing that happens in your business on a daily basis is a crisis, right? I mean, how many of you, I love to ask this question in small business, how many of you have had, in the same week, a key employee walk out, or you have to fire them, or somehow they're gone, one of your pieces of technology breaks, a customer is mad at you, all in either the same month, same week. I mean, that's being a small business owner, right? So you have crises. I told my wife, I said, when we owned our own business, I said, it's funny. It feels like it's an inevitability that we're going to close because every day there's something that could close your doors, right? Every day there's something that could, it's such a risk, right? All those crises, you really need to think about mitigating those crises. You need to think about what you're going to say. I mean, you had to say something. If you have a loyal customer base and one of your key employees walks out or you have to get rid of them, that's a crisis that you need to mitigate. You need to be able to tell your employees why that person is gone. right? And I ran a business that involved kids that they got very attached to that person. So that was crisis management, right? You need to have a plan before something happens because you know it's going to happen, right? So here are 4 things that I submit to you that you need to think about in order to prepare for a crisis. The first thing is you got to predict. And I've spent the last 30 minutes predicting a crisis for you, right? We talked about data breach. So that's prediction. You know that data breach is out there. You know that you're going to have an employee quit. You know that you're going to have an angry customer. You know that something is going to happen, right? It's a foregone conclusion. Second thing is you got to prepare. You have to go through the scenarios. You have to do the work. What would happen if? What would we do if? Right? And then you have to educate yourself. I know you don't want to learn about PCI, but I had to tell you about it because if you don't know about it, then you can't do anything. You can't do anything to make sure that you're covered, you're protected. And then the last thing you have to do, you have to validate that what you're going to do is the right thing. And there's several ways that you can do that. Well, you're going to validate it if something happens, right? You're going to validate that it worked, and you might have to adjust your crisis plan because you're either way. And we'll talk about validating in just a minute. In fact, we'll talk about it right here. So let's talk about Target again. It's interesting, crisis in small business, because there are all kinds of crises that we see. One thing that we like to compare to a data breach is a fire, right? And before we talk about the comparison, let me ask you this. How many of you think Target handled their data breach well? Wow, okay. Yeah, go ahead. Keep your hands high. Let me see. How many of you think they handled it well? Actually, it's a lot fewer than I thought. I've heard a lot of people say that they thought they handled it extremely well. And the point is, my point is not to bash Target, but let me ask you this. Do you think they could have won either way? I mean, I don't think that even if you had half the room divided, there's another half that thought they handled it poorly, right? So you can't win, right? So look at the case of fire. It's very similar. It shuts your business down for a period of time. It's something you really probably had not much control over. I'm sure you didn't light a match and throw it into your pharmacy. And I'm sure that what we've found is that the financial impact is very similar. You have to rebuild, you're out of commission for a while. But here's the interesting thing. If Target had had a fire, would you have thought of them as a victim? Yes. Did you ever once think of them as a victim during this data breach? Well, that's good, because most people I talk to don't even look at it that way. And I guarantee you the average consumer, most of them don't think of them as a victim. They think of themselves as the victim, right? And they don't have as much compassion for Target. I just saw your hands. They didn't handle it too well, so you didn't have too much compassion for them. I mean, it's a totally different mindset when you think about how angry and violated people feel when you've stolen, you were in some way, they think, responsible for having their information stolen. And the fact is there's a big group of people that just won't come back. You've lost their trust. So now again, we're talking about customer loyalty. So I think this is an interesting comparison that when you look at crisis, because you need to think about fires that happen. I mean, all these things happen. You need to be prepared for them from a crisis management standpoint. So these are 3 key components. How prepared are you? How prepared are you for a financial gap in your business? 3 months is the average number of months that go by, and this is people that are pretty prepared before they can't pay their bills in a small business. So think about how prepared are you? What's your response going to be? How are you going to respond to? And every crisis is a little different in how you want to respond. Target, did they respond quickly enough? do you remember they did a one-day discount? Do you remember that? How appropriate is your response? Do you think who thinks that was an appropriate response, a one-day discount? So obviously they didn't get it right? So, depending on what the crisis is, you need to know what your response is going to be. And then what's your reaction going to be? I mean, how are you going to react? Response is kind of, it's your response to the crisis and what you're going to say. Your reaction is, how are you going to fix the problem? What are you going to do? So these are things that you need to think about when you're looking at crisis management. So you need to be prepared. The key is you have to respond quickly. And that's where you have the plan. You just go through the plan. You say, oh, this is what we said we were going to do. We got to do it. Did Target respond quickly enough? If you think they responded quickly enough, raise your hand. Yeah. It felt like a while. And did you notice that they kept changing what happened or changing the scope of what happened? They said, oh, you know what? It was only this group of people. It wasn't, So, you have to be prepared immediately. They were not prepared for this. I can tell you that right now. It's obvious how they responded. They really weren't prepared. So you have to focus on the customer. You got to put yourself in their shoes. What would you want to know? How quickly would you want to be notified? What would put your mind at ease as a customer? That's what you need to focus on. So I'm not going to read this slide. I mean, this is in your resource booklet or on the site. But these are some of the things that you got to think about when putting your crisis management plan together. And it really is something that you need to take seriously and maybe go to lunch with your management team or some of your key staff members and talk through some of this and get some great ideas. Different people, remember, what we just did a couple of polls, and some people think Target responded really well, that they were quick enough. So, I mean, it warrants a discussion because different people have different opinions about what quick enough is, what appropriate is. So you really need to work through this stuff. And it's a process. It's not going to be something you do in 15 minutes and you're done with, right? You need to think through it. And then really after, this is what Target's doing now, right? They're trying to recover and rebuild. And I think just this week they came out with some preliminary numbers about how much they've had to spend. And it's a lot. So they're trying to recoup. Did everybody see that their profitability went down? So I would submit that I can tell you my wife shopped there the day after the breach. I mean, I don't think people are going to stop shopping necessarily at Target, but their profitability went down because they've spent a ton of money to try to recoup. So you got to, after the whole thing's over, you can bet that Target is going to regroup and they're going to say, what did we do well and what do we need to learn from and what are we going to do? Target is going to a chip and pin solution, which eventually the country will go towards. But they decided that they're going to take a very conservative route and they're going to kind of go overboard and not let this happen again. Yeah, who should be on the crisis management team? Did everything work well, and should we maybe shift the crisis management team? Should we have somebody else on it now? You always need to look at who you're asking. You need to ask other people besides, you shouldn't do this alone, right? Don't do this alone. You need other people to help you create this within your organization. So there's a checklist that we provide that we can give you that is really helpful. It kind of helps you outline everything that you need to think about in a crisis. And this is beyond data breach. It's kind of everything. So the key is you cannot ignore this, okay? You cannot put your head in the sand. 3-4 years ago, people were like, it's not going to happen to me. 1 in 6 small businesses will be breached. So you know that you have to deal with this. And you got to remember these stats. They're compelling, and we didn't make these up. These are out there, and they're true. So what can you do? So from a PCI compliance standpoint, I'm going to give you more than most IT people and large companies know that you need to do as your first steps to be PCI compliant. You need to be proactive because, again, if you get breached, you're still going to have to do this. You're just going to have to do it with less money in your pocket, and you're going to have to do it under duress. And here's two things that you need to look for when you're dealing with any sort of PCI provider or consultant. There are certifications, just like in your world, that we have to get from the PCI Council. And these take an enormous amount of time and energy and require some smarter guys than I am, okay? So the first is being a qualified security assessor. We call it a QSA. Never work with a company that does not have that title. Because what it means is there are big companies that your targets, those size companies, that must work with a QSA. As a small merchant, you are not required to work with a QSA company, but the big companies are. So I say you might as well work with an expert. Approved scanning vendor. This is, again, kind of an IT geek term. Just like QSA, work with an ASV, an approved scanning vendor. Those are two credentials that you don't have to take my word for it. You can Google, and these are the highest certifications that you can get from the PCI Council. So remember those. And really, you got to think, okay, does this PCI auditor, does this PCI company understand my market? Because it is very different. I mean, we work with several different markets, and I can tell you the restaurant industry is very different than your industry. The things that you guys think about, your environment, the way you deal with credit cards, the way you deal with systems, it's very different. So you want to work with a company that understands your market. And do they understand your environment and all of the systems that surround it? It's very important. So the first thing we recommend is you need to financially protect your business. You need to take that $80,000 out of the picture so that that's not what you have to worry about. And there are data breach protection programs, you can Google them on the internet, that provide a there's several different approaches that people take. And you see $50,000, $100,000. Here's something you need to look for. Many data breach protection programs, they're kind of like insurance. Our lawyer hates it when we call it insurance, so I'm not going to call it insurance. But what it does is in the event of a reported breach, it pays you for the forensic audit, the cardholder replacement fees, the fines, all of that. But here's the caveat. Many of them, and I would submit most of them, only pay if you can prove that you're 100% compliant. Well, it's like, if you were 100% compliant, it's likely you wouldn't have gotten breached anyway, because 96% of companies that are breached are not PCI compliant. So it's sort of a catch-22, right? So you need to find a program and they call it the safe harbor zone. So they only pay out if you're in the safe harbor zone. Well, if you had a breach today, would you be in the safe harbor zone? Find a program that will pay you even when you're going through the process of becoming compliant. And there are some programs out there, I know ANX offers one, that is retroactive, that will pay you before, if a breach has happened to you today or yesterday or 2 years ago and it hasn't been reported, they will pay you retroactively. So that's a nice feature. But you need to financially protect yourself, just like you would in any insurance workers' comp situation. The second is you got to understand where you are today. I mean, it's painful, but you need to set the bar and say, okay, here's where I am. I've done some of the work. Maybe you've installed a firewall. Where am I at today? How compliant am I today? So validate your compliance. And remember, that was one of the key components to data crisis management. So how compliant are you today? You've likely done some of the work, right? Your point of sale system maybe has done some of the work for you. And which compliance program is suited to your needs? And then you got to go the next step. After you've taken a long, hard look at your program today and what you have in place, you need to take that and you need to put a plan in place to achieve compliance and look for bundles or packages that include what you need to get compliant. And guess what? Once you get compliant, you got to stay compliant. It's not, unfortunately, it's just a snapshot in time. It has to be an ongoing thing. And then you need somebody that's going to help you because you're going to have a lot of questions, right? You're not the expert. So you need somebody, and you don't want to pay for that, right? I mean, you need to find a partner that's going to help you ongoing. And it's always changing, right? I mean, it's just like any other regulation. It changes. We just had PCI 3.0 that came out, and there were some changes. So you can't keep up with all that. We do, and we help you to navigate that. So you need the tools to get compliant. There's really two components that we look at. The IT geeks will love the firewall component because it talks bits and bytes, and it's a perimeter device. It's like Star Trek. It's there to protect you, right? But you also need tools that outside of just data security, you need tools to keep you compliant from a process standpoint. Remember, you got to do the training. You got to have your policies. There's something called a self-assessment questionnaire that's got a bunch of IT geek questions. You got to answer those questions. So there are tools out there that you can utilize that help you with all of that. So that it makes it's like the TurboTax. So we're not all of us are accountants and understand everything about our taxes. This is what this does for you. It helps you through those tough questions and provides you the resources you need to get compliant. And this is not a system that's installed on your computer. It's not something that needs to be updated. Most of these systems are cloud-based. It's not something you have to worry about compatibility. And then the whole firewall situation is something you need to have a compliance person talk to you about. You can't go to Best Buy and buy a firewall that's $200. Okay, I know that's what you want to do, but you need an enterprise class firewall. You need something that's truly going to protect your business. Of course, these are always up here. We've been through these. So again, you got to predict, and we've done a lot of that today. You got to prepare. You got to put that crisis management plan in place. You got to get educated, and we've done some of that today. You know more about PCI, I guarantee you, than most large businesses do. And then you got to validate. You got to find out how compliant you are, and you got to take a long, hard look at yourself and your business. And then you got to decide how you're going to move forward and get help, right? Because you can't do it on your own. The key is, this is not the kind of publicity you want. And I know that, these are national papers, and you don't think it can happen to you, but you all have businesses in communities, whether they're small or large, and there is publicity, whether it's word of mouth or the local paper. Somebody's going to report that you were breached somewhere. So you've got to deal with this today. You've got the resources. PDS has done great work putting the resources in your hands. Even if you just need to have a conversation about what you're doing, we're here to talk about it with you. If you've got questions, there's no stupid question, right? If I told you how I dealt with credit cards when I was a small business owner, probably give away a lot of my credibility. I'm just like you guys. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing, and I came from a telecom background. I mean, I worked in telecom and technology before being a small business owner, and I still didn't understand everything about data security. It wasn't something fun. I mean, that's not why I wanted a small business. But you got to do this today. Get it done today. Don't wait. It's an expense that you have to incur. And I know that. Everybody says you have to buy my product, right? And I'm not even telling you buy my product. I'm saying you have to do this. This is not an option. You have to protect your credit card information. So don't say you're going to do it tomorrow. Don't say you're going to do it next week. You have to address it because you've probably already been breached somehow. So this is my last slide. I know it's been fun talking about credit card security. We could do it all day, right? So we have a great booklet. We spent a lot of time putting this together on crisis management. Great tool, and we have some of them at our booth, and we have a limited number, but come by, grab one, ask us questions. We're here to help. Ask us all the questions that I wasn't able to answer today. And if you're an IT guy, if you want to talk about firewalls, we can talk about firewalls. Right? If you want to talk about process and what's happening in your business, we can talk about that. But this is the important thing. Talk about it and deal with it today. Have peace of mind. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you. Thank you. How many of you, I'm just curious, have a flashlight app on your phone? Yeah, that's most of the new people. Last year, we found out from the security guy who would work with Interpol and that's one of the least secure, one of the ways that they use to access your information is through these flashlight apps. He also told us that pharmacies, small business pharmacies, are targets. They are specific targets. There's opportunity there. And Mike, where are you? Right here. You did the ANX thing this past year, and it was I mean, you're not an internet geek or anything like that, so it took a little bit of work, but it was like a 10-foot steel wall around, so it worked out really well. And I don't think in the whole scheme of things, it's all very expensive, so more of a hassle when you lose, like I did, my director of finance for essentially 2 months dealing with our issue.